Grand AM, and welcome back to my channel. This video series, and it will be a series, I'm not sure how many parts it will be, but it's going to be covering narcissism and how it is connected to demonic spirits. I want to say this video is not to demean or put anybody down or just be mean and say this and say that. It's to help someone, because a lot of people may not know they're in a relationship with a narcissist, but they may just feel overwhelmed, drained, feel like they're crazy. So I want to share my experience with what being married in a narcissistic relationship, growing up, with my first encounter was with a narcissist was my father. So I want to share that with people. And on part 2, I think I'm going to invite people I'm going to do a live and invite people to join in and share their stories with me or with the world. This is to shine light on this very important issue that a lot of people seems to overlook, because nowadays it seems like saying someone is a narcissist is just saying it's almost like it's common as their last name. But many people, especially maybe younger women, they don't know that what they're a victim of. So I want to start out with, and I have a notebook, so I'm not reading from a script. This is just so I won't forget certain notes. My first experience was with a narcissist was my dad. Back in the early 60s, not early 60s, late 60s, early 70s. I don't know if narcissist was even a word. But I can tell you, my father, excuse me, I like to sit outside on the porch. My father was, like I said before in my videos, my father was he used to be a Golden Glove boxer. He helped train Muhammad Ali. Before he was Muhammad Ali, he was Cassius Clay. I'm from Kentucky. And he was also a minister. He was ordained. He was an alcoholic. He was a drug abuser, and he was a wife abuser. And he was not a good person. When he wasn't drinking, he was kind of a quiet, laid back kind of man. We didn't play with him, even then when he was peaceful and being laid back. But he wasn't so much like a violent, sadistic man. But once he had alcohol, or he was also on heroin, certain drugs, his personality would change completely. He became a antagonistic, bully, just horrible monster. And he was very abusive. He eventually beat my mother to the point where she was crippled, where she was, her limbs were beginning to be disfigured. She had to have 2 knee replacements, 2 hip replacements. And I will never forget when my mom was on her deathbed, I asked the doctor, what brought on, her health overall being the way it was? Did arthritis, she had rheumatoid arthritis, did that affect anything as far as her immune system and all that. And he said, anyone, he said, to look at my mom, you could tell she had been abused, her condition. He said, anyone, whoever did whatever they did to my mom to get her in that position, in that predicament, in that health, that kind of health, took 15 to 20 years from her life. And I'll never forget that. At the time when my mother was in the hospital, me and my siblings, we didn't want to go get our father because, there was just some hard feelings, between my father and pretty much all of us for the way, he did my mother, the way he treated us. He didn't take care of us. But I went to get him anyway because they were still married. My mother, she never got a divorce. She separated. She left. And I'll never forget what happened that night. Well, the month before that, like I said, my father was abusive. I took him to the hospital. I went and found him because I knew, some of our family members that he hung around with. And I told him of our mom's condition, and he seemed sincerely sad. I took him to the hospital, and we had been up there, me and my siblings, with my mom the whole time she was in the hospital. And it had been, weeks on, and then she back, and then weeks, and then on, So when I walked in the room with my father, excuse me, my siblings and I was really, the way my mother perked up, she didn't perk up like that when we walked in the room, but when my father walked in the room, she perked up. And me and my siblings went down to the cafeteria in the hospital, and we were all just talking. Did you see how she perked up all the way he did her? But I'll say my mother was very forgiving. She still, after all the things he had done to her, she still loved him. And I couldn't explain that. I couldn't understand it. I think all of my siblings, we had a hard time understanding it. It's like, why in the world? But that's what it was. Well, I made sure of my siblings, I've always I'm not the only one, but kind of outspoken without being disrespectful. I did my best, and I told my father, the doctor said whoever abused her the way they did took 15 to 20 years off her life. And it seemed like when I said that, my father's shoulders slumped. He seemed like, he seemed sad, he seemed ashamed. And it seemed like he didn't want to, after that, he didn't want to be around me and my siblings. I noticed it was like he just felt like seemed like he was out of place. He was at the hospital by the greeter that comes in the door and, welcomes people to the hospital. He was doing that. So I'm thinking, okay, I that really threw him off to hear that, maybe from one of his kids, because when we were coming up, we were all pretty scared of our father because we knew, we knew what he was capable of doing. We were terrified of him. So, as time went on, it didn't take that much time. My mom died, like maybe within a week of that. She had to have surgery. And I remember before my mom died, she stayed with me. I took care of my mother up until she passed away. And I remember her last words to me. Well, at the time I was married, I had been married a while. And my mother really liked my husband. She thought he was a good guy. Oh, he's this, he's that. He's a good guy. But until my mother came to live with me when she was sick and on her deathbed, then she saw what now is my ex-husband was really like. And the last thing my mother told me when she went into her surgery, because my mom knew they gave her like a 98% chance that she would not make it through the surgery and a 2% chance that she would. But even if she did, her life would be even a worse quality than it had been the last probably 30 years of her life. So my mom told me, she said, Bet, I want you, if it's the last thing you do, and she told me not to make it the last thing I do. She said, I want you to drop that, I don't want to use the word she used, the N-word, like a hot potato. She said, picture in your mind, you go up to the highest building in our city, our state, downtown actually. She said, and act like you've picked up a hot potato from the oven and drop him so quick. She said, because you deserve better. You don't deserve the way you're treated. And I don't want you to go through what I went through. And that was, other than telling my mom I love her and she loved me, that was the last thing that my mother said to me. That was the last advice. My mother also, before that, I used to talk to my mother a lot. Of my siblings, I think I was the only one that always asked about her childhood. And she couldn't tell me so much because my mom was, she thought she was adopted. She was just taken in. And back then they didn't have computers, so you couldn't do the research. I'm sorry, I'm not crying. It's just the air kind of is air quality, I guess. You couldn't do the research. So my mom didn't really know her family. She knew her mom died when she was really young. She knew her father she thought gave her to her mother's cousin to take care of her because she was a little girl and an infant. He couldn't take care of her. So my mom didn't really know her story. Computers wasn't around back then, but I know I was kind of like, I wanted to know. So time went on. My mom passed. I was still married. And one of the things my mom also made me promise to her, is that I would tell her story. Her story meaning, and she, we wasn't famous people. We just who we are. But my mom wanted people to know as far as abuse and not to take it. My mother told me and my sister, don't let no man hit you. Don't do this. Don't allow this. Don't allow that. Because if you do it once, you're going to do it again. And I remember sometimes when, after my dad would beat my mom, me and my sister, I remember mainly my sister because she's older than me, bathing, my mom, because her body would hurt, So my mother told us not to take it. She wanted me to tell her story. I was kind of a comedian, so I would sit around talking to my mom and make her laugh. So, she said that I had the ability to take a bad situation and show the importance, but still, make people laugh from it. So that was what I did. I promised her to do it. To this day, I've started, never finished, got so far, got so much going on in my life, I haven't finished it. So maybe I can tell my mom's story through my platform, instead of not telling it at all. I used to write. I don't know how to write a book. So, I have a son that has wrote a few of them, and he's offered to help me, but I don't know. I just got It seemed like I always have something to do. So, so now we're going to fast forward to me. I met a guy when I was in high school. We were both in high school. I was a sophomore. He was a senior. And he was just the sweetest guy. You know, he was kind of shy. He was I thought a really good guy, you know. And we dated for a few years. And then we wanted to get married. I got married very young. I was 17. And I wanted to get married at 16, and my mother said no. She said no, but I was very defiant, you know. I was very rebellious. I was doing terrible in school. I've never been dumb, but in school, I couldn't get my mind, you know. I couldn't keep my mind focused enough to do well in school. And I never could understand why. You know, I would ask, why do I go through this? Because I just didn't understand it. It took me to be a full-grown adult before I could understand why I struggled in school. And it wasn't the understanding the academics. It was the sitting my behind down in school and doing what I was supposed to do. I couldn't do it. I kind of felt like what they were teaching us in school. They couldn't teach me what I had seen in my life. What they were teaching me, it's like, how's this gonna? I didn't see how it was gonna fare in my life. So it just didn't work out. So at 16, I remember, for one thing, I was so far behind to graduate with my class. I would have almost like had to do 2.5 more years of school than I was supposed to. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't want to do that. And 16 in America, I give me a job, I give me a, so I thought I knew everything. So I quit school. And one thing is about the laws in America. If a child wants to quit school at the parent can't do nothing to stop it. Parents, a lot of times, they're losing rights. So, but even back then, I was supposed to be the class of 83. My mother couldn't stop it. She couldn't stop it. So I quit school. And I asked my mom, I kept telling, I want to get married. I want to get married. He had left for the Army. And my mother said, because she had to sign for me. She said, if y'all are still together in 1 year, a year from now, and you want to get married, I will sign for it. And I think it was just because, I don't know, I think I was wearing her down. I don't know, I was hard-headed. It wasn't nothing she could tell me to persuade me differently, because I thought I had the perfect man. I thought young man, I thought, he does this for me, does that for me. We do things for each other. And, so at 17, one of the times he came home from the military, first time we did not get married. He came home after basic training, and then he was stationed in Germany. And then after he came home the first time, we got married. And so I went to Germany. I lived in Germany for 6 months. And I was 17. And the first incident that I had with him completely just threw me off. It was like 11:45 p.m. at night. My birthday was the next day. So we were just sitting up in bed talking, and he just went on a tangent calling me names, and you ain't this and you ain't that, and if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be here. And I was so thrown off. I didn't know what was happening. For one thing, I think back to it now, I was a baby, 18, 17, very young, very young. And I could not understand. I'm like, what? Well, you ain't this, and and if you had done this without me, you wouldn't have made it anyway. He called me names, bad names. And then it came around to 12 o'clock, and he stopped and said, "Happy birthday." I didn't understand. I was so confused. I didn't understand. And, and I didn't know whether to say thank you, but I know when he was calling the names, it wasn't like a loud argument. It was just very subtle within a conversation where you kind of like demeaning me in a quiet way and saying things. And I was so shocked. I didn't even know how to react because there was no argument or nothing, and I was confused, to say the least. I was very confused. And that was the first encounter that I had with, back then it wasn't even called, as far as in the circle I walked in, it wouldn't even been considered abuse of any kind, because in the black neighborhoods, in the black households, at least in ours, there was always arguments. There was always name calling. It was common. It was common, to us. Siblings, but I mean, it wasn't like cussing out, names. It wasn't like that. But it was common. So, but coming from him, it just threw me off. Now, we had been together a few years. We had arguments, but woo, that never happened. Another thing too was I missed a lot of signs. When you're dealing with somebody, anybody, you have to read the signs. If you miss the signs, you're going to find yourself at a dead end. So you have to read the signs. There were signs that I missed. So going on into the marriage, as time went on, I found out a lot of things. Well, let me focus on one thing too. That when we were in the military, he did bring home a big old book one day. It was to get my GED. He did that. I didn't say, "Hey, I want to get my GED." He just brought it home. And at this time, we had one child. We had our oldest son, and I was pregnant, I think. And yeah, he brought the GED book home, helped me study. And the first time I took the GED, I missed it by 1 point. So in the military, if you were doing that, you had to wait 6 months. So I had to wait 6 months, and then I took it again. I took it the first time in June. Second time I took it was December 18th, and I passed. December 18, 1984. So I had my GED, and when we talked to people, he made it a point to, I was the one that got the GED book for. I was the one to help her pass if it wasn't for me. And I noticed that a lot, as the time went on. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't do this. If it wasn't for me, You wouldn't do that. But what I noticed too is after he got out of the army and we moved back home, we had to stay with his family until we got on our feet. And when I tell you about if there is a family that almost every last one of them is a narcissist, mean, nasty, not in a straightforward kind of way. Well, some straightforward, some kind of subtle. My God. There was so much boy, so many bad situations with them, and I was young. I think maybe now, maybe 20, 21, 21 maybe, trying to get along with the family, because I've never been scared of anybody. I've never, I'll sit back and watch people, and then I might react if whatever is going on affects me. But in this case, because it was my in-laws, I took a lot of stuff. I took stuff I shouldn't have taken. But it was to try to get along because I was married into the family. My sister-in-law was like the devil, okay? She was, oh my God, this girl was mean. She was nasty. She was terrible. And the thing about it, the way the family was, they could do and say things to me, and my husband wouldn't stand up for me. He wouldn't say anything. So that also was a bad situation. So there was one time where my sister-in-law, me and her got into it because she just had a big mouth, and she thought because I didn't, respond to her the way she was with me, I think she thought I was scared. So one day we got into it because I was tired of, she would ask my husband at the time, because she had 2 sons, if me and him could keep her son so she could go to the nightclub. She's always in the nightclubs. And he would say, yeah. Didn't ask me, just, oh yeah. And knowing he wasn't going to keep them because they were small kids. We had kids too. But why I'm keeping them, why he tells her we keep them, then he gets dressed and he goes to the nightclub. So I'm stuck with, the kids. So after a while I said something, and she got really upset. So when she got upset, their father got really upset. And he started saying, this girl ain't gonna never be nothing. This girl ain't got, even though she just got her GED, she ain't gonna be nothing. She's jealous of, and they would say I was jealous of the sister. For what reason, I don't know. But, she's just jealous. Well, the sister walked up to me as if, like, she wants to fight. So, I stood up like, okay, she come over here, and I was gonna knock her out. Before anything happened, the father took and pushed me. He pushed me so hard I fell, and I hit my face on something. I remember I was bleeding. And I was upset. Even back then, I wouldn't dare buck up to fight, an adult, especially my parent, one of his parents. I wouldn't, I just couldn't do that. I remember I was upset, so I remember I called a cab. I said I was leaving, and I took my 2 kids and I went to my mom's house. And my ex-husband did not stand up or say anything to his father about it. He says, that's what you get. You're always doing something. You're always, you know. So I stayed over my mom's until we got a place. And then after that, I just noticed a lot of, well, if it wasn't for me, this, you a high school dropout. You couldn't do this without me. You just, demeaning, put you down. And when you go through years and years of that, you start, it just beats down your esteem. I was always the type, the kids kept coming, of course. I was always the type, I was very motherly. I always took care of my kids. A lot of stuff I didn't do if my kids couldn't do it with me, So I would always have my kids. And we had been married for years and years. And when my father-in-law would come over, he always addressed me as that girl. Did that girl cook? And I've always cooked. I'm a good cook. So he would go in there and eat our food. Husband never said anything. It was his family. They could do whatever they wanted to do. So we would get in arguments and I would bring up his family and he would get really upset, when I say stuff about his family, about their treatment of me and how he never stood up. So after a while, I noticed with our kids, as they got older, it was like he kept stuff going on in between them, where your brother said this about you. He might say it to another brother, but he'll say, no, don't tell him I told you because they said not to say nothing. And that happened in our family a lot. That happened in our family a lot. It also happened with my youngest son. Well, my oldest son, he treated my husband at the time, he treated him terrible, to the point where me and him would literally get in arguments, sometimes even fights, over the way he did my son. Our son. Well, as time went on, the second one, he would, he want to hit, and he would always do it when, his family was over. He want to show off, Well, with my second son, it was kind of like, Daddy, it ain't going to end up the way it do with, with the older one. You're not just going to be putting your hands on me and I'm just going to stand here. So then he started saying, my husband was saying, you know what? I got to find a different way to deal with the kids. I don't need to be putting my hands on them. And then the third son, it was the same way. He wanted to try that. And that was the same thing. That wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. So then he was like, I got to see how to deal with the kids. I don't need to be putting my hands on them. Well, it wasn't the fact that he don't need to. It was that they wasn't going to let him bully him. So, like I said, I was always vocal. I said, you know what? I just sit back and I watch. And then there were other things that happened in our marriage that I'm like, okay, ding, 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 a light came on. This man is a coward. So, my youngest is a girl. And as she got older, he was saying, well, she don't know. I'm going to put my hands on her. She going to make me put my hands on her. A girl. Not to mention she's very small, very short, very petite. Now all of a sudden, I'm going to have to put my hands on her. The oldest one, the youngest. The oldest one was never scared. It was respect. The youngest one, but even respecting a parent after an adult and you've been demeaned, he would try to embarrass them in front of people, in front of their friends, people. But everybody used to always say, oh, you got the perfect husband. He's the perfect father, because the way he treated people outside our family was like gold. It was like gold. But when we would get home, he would literally terrorize us. You know, there couldn't be nothing out of place, or else he would, if he went in their room and he saw it might be anything out of place, he'll mess up the whole room, clean it up, you know. And you know, he would do that. Me and him, we used to get into it because in the middle of the night he want to go in there and whoop him or something. Madness to me. So as time went on, I remember talking to a friend of mine, and she was telling me, she came into work one day and she was kind of upset. She said her and her husband had gotten into an argument, and she was so upset with him because he called her out of her name. And I said, well, what did he call you? She said, he called me silly. He called her silly. And I said, he called you silly? She said, yeah. And I said, and that bothered you? And she said, yeah, he never called me out of my name. Well, I had been called so many names, you know, silly I would have took that with a badge of honor. My husband was calling me the B's. He was calling me the W word, you know, all kind of terrible things. So I told her, I told her what kind of names my husband said. Oh, no, you'll never take that. I thought that was normal within marriages, you know, because I don't get it. Everybody I've been around, you know, well, not everybody, but younger people, you know, I thought that was common. She's like, no. And then I noticed the way my ex-husband was. He would call me on his way home while he's driving home. It was a normal conversation. But by the time he pull up and get in the house, he's arguing and going off about something. So we never knew, you know, what kind of mood he was going to be in. So me and my kids, I was always really close to all my kids. We'd be downstairs talking, laughing. But I would want him to call, or I would call him, because I wanted to give my kids a heads up. Your dad's going to come in the door, and they would take off. Everybody, they'd be in their rooms. And he started noticing. It's funny, it seemed like y'all were talking, but when I get everybody's gone. Ain't nobody, you know, here. And I said, oh, they cleaning their rooms. I might say something like that, because he would literally just mess with my sons mainly, not my daughter. He would always take my daughter and, you know, y'all ain't like her. She's this. She's going to be that. Y'all going to be like your mother's family. Y'all this. He was just always very demeaning, you know. So one day I looked up his characteristics, because I'm thinking there has to be a medical term for this. Somebody just cannot be a butthole 24 hours a day. So I looked up, you know, I typed in his characteristics. And what popped up was narcissistic personality disorder. I had never heard of that, you know, so I printed out I printed it out because I wanted to read it, and they had like little websites where you could go and take tests, and I took those tests. You know, I answered questions about him, about myself, about him, and mine came back where you have some narcissistic traits. Everybody has traits, you know, but then some people, if you score a certain, I think if you score higher, you know, they have levels of, you know, a narcissist, and then everybody carry the traits. So I took the stuff home and I told him about it because I was sincere. You know, I asked him, I told him that I was concerned about his health. I felt like he had something going on. And I told him what I had found. And he looked at it. He read it a little bit. And he said, you know what, all this time, I remember when I used to think it was something wrong with me. But you know what? I finally realized it ain't nothing wrong with me. You and your kids are effed up. And when he said that, it was, you know, it was like, okay, I already know where this is going. We had all kind of issues where, you know, I threatened to leave. But this, as time went on, and it didn't take much time after that. I was in school, and I remember it came to a point. It was you know, we built two houses together. It was our house, but I started noticing little things like he always had way more clothes than I did. So our closet, he started, you know, you got too much room, you know. So I knew where I was going eventually. So I started bringing boxes, and I started putting my stuff in boxes. And he started saying, I remember he asked me, "Are you the type," of call me a B, "Are you the type of B that'll take my house?" Because he's military. And we had a really big, pretty house, you know. And I told him, I just told him, "I'll surprise you." Uh, so as time went on, you know, and eventually he would call, man, even in front of our grandkids, he would call me names. He would say some of the most, he said something to me one time that was so bad I removed his pictures from my phone, because when he would call me and his picture come up, it literally made me sick at the stomach. So I took his picture out of the phone. And you know, he asked me one day, he said, "You know, I notice when the kids call you, they have their picture, your family call. How come my picture ain't there?" And I told him, "Looking at you just makes me sick to my stomach, and I don't want your picture in my phone." And of course, we got into it. He's calling names. It got back to a point, and when he would call me names, you know, it wasn't when I would call him names back. It wasn't like, oh, he did this and I just took it. But what I didn't realize is, well, I'll get to that later. Um, I remember I was getting ready to graduate, because I went back to school. Me and my youngest daughter. I wanted to go back to school after all of my children had were able, if they wanted to go to college, they could. So when my youngest was a senior, I enrolled in school because I wanted to, I wanted my degree. I wanted to finish my education. So we did that. It just so happened me and my daughter, we got our degrees together each time, associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree. And then when we were in line to get our stuff for our graduation, he would, "Oh, I wish I was graduating. I wish it was me." He was behind me in line when we were picking up our stuff. He just wanted to go with us. And I remember, you know, telling him, "Shut up, you know, get out of my ear." At this point, everything about him just made me sick, you know, literally. Um, so then he enrolled in school because he wasn't going to be outdone by a high school dropout with a GED. And he told me that. So he went back to school. And so when we graduated with our bachelor's degree, he did a accelerated program. So he graduated with a bachelor's degree as well. Um, but my thing is, that was okay to me because I thought in a marriage it was a partnership. I didn't think it was a competition. So he was competing. So after a while, he started saying stuff like, uh, you need to get out of my house. We would get in arguments, and he would tell, "If you don't like it with me, then leave. I want to see how well you do by yourself." I had never lived on my own because I got married so young. And so eventually I ended up getting a place, and I remember he telling the kids again, "Hey, y'all, your mother's leaving me again." It was kind of a laughing matter to him. He thought it was funny because he didn't think I was going to leave. So I did leave. And what I realized is years of manipulation, belittling, control, abusive behavior, um, mentally, emotionally, financially, um, uh, spiritually, uh, I went through abuse. I remember years ago when I would tell him, that's emotional abuse after I started learning about it. Ain't no such thing as no damn emotional abuse. So, I already knew the only way to end this was, to actually physically, literally end it. It got to the point where my last few months in the house, I was always at the hospital. I mean, this man would call me at my job and we arguing. He's calling terrible names on the phone. And I remember one time he called me at work and he was going off. And where I worked, we had an on-site nurse. And I remember hanging up on him, and I remember I couldn't breathe. It was like the anxiety it messed me up so bad I couldn't breathe. So I'm walking around to the nurse's office and I'm kind of unbuttoning my shirt a little, just a little, like, maybe I can breathe better. I get to the nurse's office and she comes out there to the lobby part and she's seeing me right quick. And she lays me down, tell me to lay down on the thing, and she calls 911. She calls down to our security. And they came upstairs. And if you're talking about one of the most uncomfortable times, the security guards came up and they're unbuttoning my blouse, and I'm trying to, smack the hand and keep my blouse buttoned, and they're putting the little sticky thing so they can monitor my heart. So I had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And my doctor visits started getting more frequent, to the point where my doctor was telling me, she said, what has got your, she didn't know what to treat me for. Blood pressure started to elevate. I was just like a mess, And she said, what has got you, got your anxiety and stuff up like that? And she told me I was under so much stress. And she asked me, was it my job? It wasn't my job. I loved my job to the point where I hated at home. I would go to work and I would work almost like 10, 11-hour days just because I didn't want to be at home. So she asked me, is it your job? Wasn't my job. Is it your children? Wasn't my children. It was my husband. So my doctor, I went to the doctor that time. And then a little while later, and they thought I had a heart attack. I didn't. She said it was a panic attack. And she said those resemble heart attacks closely because you lose your breath and, can't breathe, dizzy. I was messed up. So it happened, I got home and arrested. And my sons, Mom, you got to do better. You got to do this. But they weren't aware of really what I was going through, because at this time my kids had moved out. And then I remember, something else happened again. We got a real bad argument. No, I remember what happened. We went to a high school reunion, one of his high school reunions. And I remember he left me at the bar. And I just happened to look up, and he was sitting in a round table. It was like 6 women, and he was sitting in the middle. And at this point, I didn't care. I was so tired, So I just asked him. I said, "Give me the keys and let me go home, and you can come back, or you can let me catch a cab and you can stay." Well, he says, no, we can leave. So we left, went home. And we had an issue before that. Another video, I'll tell you about that too. We had an issue before that. So the next morning he was pissed off, pissed me off. You did this, you did that. I remember it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, because I had to get up and go to work. He was, when I got up and I came in the bathroom, for one thing, the light's already on, so I'm trying to shield my eyes from the lights. And he was going off and cussing, called me a B, and just, whack, balled up his fist and hit me here. And I remember thinking, like, what the crap? I didn't, you just get hit and all of a sudden. I'm thinking, what the, I didn't understand. So, we getting into it. We arguing. We had put up curtains or blinds or something the night before, so it was a screwdriver. And, I tried to stick him with it, probably did. I didn't understand. Well, at the time, my son was staying with us. So he could hear us upstairs, and he comes upstairs, Daddy, did you hit her? And I mean, I didn't understand. I was shocked, like, you get hit and then all of a sudden. So then I started noticing, I called in work. I went to the doctor. I told the doctor that what had happened, and I felt like I was losing hearing. It's like my hearing was in and out on this side. And the doctor asked me what happened, and I told her. Well, she said, for one thing, they wouldn't be able to see if I had a hearing loss that quick. It would have to be after like a certain length of time. So I went to work from my doctor's appointment, and I remember when I got home, I told my husband that I think I was losing hearing from it. Well, if it's my fault, sorry. That was how he apologized to me. I'm like, okay. So my doctor, when I was there, she was telling me, you can't keep going through this. You are literally a walking dead woman. She said, if you, well, no, that was with the hearing thing. That was in 2011. Some years, things was just progressively getting worse. And then I remember when I went to the doctor, I started going frequently, 2014, 15. And I remember her telling me, she said, you know what, this was in June 2015. She said, you know what, I know it's not my place to give you this advice, but let me tell you, as your doctor, you're a walking dead woman. She said, if you don't do something to get out of this marriage, to get your life back in order, your children are going to be burying you before the year's out. And I'm thinking, before the year's out, this is already June. I knew three people that within maybe 2 years of that died from stress and anxiety. And I think the Most High was showing me, he was showing me this. So I remember I went home and I told my husband that, I can't do this no more. I got to go. I can't do it. I told him that the anxiety, the stress, I just couldn't do it no more. Well, later on, I hear him on the phone telling my children, y'all killing your mother, y'all stressing her out. Y'all got to stop doing this. So all my kids, they call me, Mom, what can we do? What is it? And I told them, what are y'all talking about? Well, Daddy said we stressing you. No. My kids were doing normal stuff, like they needed gas money. They needed, can we come over and get some groceries? Mom, do you have this? That's not stressful to me. So everything I was going through, he put it on the children. He put it on our kids. Y'all killing your mother. So that was in June. In August, I moved out. And in that October, I filed for divorce. So what I learned after that, I studied the traits of narcissism, and because I needed to understand how people can treat people so mean and nasty all the time with no reason. Never apologize. When you do something, you just go buy them something. Hey, I bought you this. I got this for you. I know you want it. Never apologize. But when I tell you, I had every household piece of equipment you could think of. I had it. But instead of apologizing, I'll buy this. I'll get that. So I studied it. I studied narcissism and traits of narcissistic people. And doctors in science, they don't like to connect science with spiritual. Back in the day when someone was what you would call demonically possessed, nowadays it's schizophrenia. There's a scientific name for everything. So I started after I was by myself, and man, I tell you, I was at peace. I never enjoyed peace. So I did a lot of study on it, and I come to find out that narcissism is connected to about 7 demonic traits, characteristics, spirits, if you will. A lot of people don't realize narcissism, the spirits that it's connected to, is kind of like a Jezebel spirit. And what people don't get is that even though Jezebel in the Bible was a woman, men carry a Jezebel spirit as well. As getting older, my kids got married, they've also encountered narcissistic women that literally, like a demon, they kill, they steal, they destroy lives, they manipulate, they lie. They are very dangerous people. And in my next video, I would like to do a live and invite people on to share their story, because I went through a lot. My mother went through a lot. If I can help somebody, I met a younger sister years ago that I met her in this walk. And we got to be friends. Up to this day, she's one of the closest people to me. She lives in New York, but we've never met in person. And she probably knows more about me than anybody I know. And vice versa. She's young enough to be my daughter. And when I met her, I was on my way out of my marriage. I was like 2 years out. And she was in a relationship where the stuff she was telling me and the things she was going through, I was like, dang, that's the stuff I went through with my in-laws. So I was giving her advice, you got to get out of there. I didn't want to see her end up like me. My marriage got me to the point where I was depressed, low self-esteem. He used to always tell me, look at you, got all these kids, you fat, who gonna marry you? You better stick with me. You need me. He would, So if I can help anybody wake up and see what they're dealing with, you're not just dealing with, oh, he's just having bad days. Some of these people are just bad people. And if I can help anybody understand, men or women, male, female, I don't care, if I can help anybody understand what they're going through and help them identify it, I would love to do it. And I would love to hear your story. So I am inviting you on my next video. I plan to schedule a live and share your stories with us. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a favorite day.